Welcome back to the One Thing podcast, everyone. We are here with Mark Matson today, who is an entrepreneur, an author, innovator in the field of investing science and financial education. You've probably seen him as a frequent guest on national news programs like Fox Business or CNBC or Bloomberg or Yahoo Finance. But he's here with us today to talk about his new book, Experiencing the American Dream: How to Invest Your Time, Energy, and Money to Create an Extraordinary Life. Welcome, Mark.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
I have to say, we haven't had a lot of money-specific experts on here today. So I'm excited for our listeners. We've got a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners, a lot of people who ask this question. And so I'm excited for them to learn from you. I'm excited to learn from you. And I'm gonna kick us off with what I feel like might be a harder question. I'm going to go right into it, if that's okay with you.
Sounds great.
You talk a lot in your regular vernacular and in this book how the American dream is sort of dying or becoming more and more unattainable. What do you actually mean by that?
Yeah, well, I definitely think it's under attack. When I talk about the American dream, there's typically three types of people. There's the people that just absolutely love it. They feel like it's part of their life, that it's been built into them. There's people that don't know, is it real? Is it not real? And then there's some people that are just American dream haters. They hate the idea of free markets. They hate the idea of capitalism. They hate the idea of that you can have rugged individualism and create your own future. So, part of my message on the American dream is that it's not dead. Now, I know there's hard times. It would be hard to ignore, high inflation, people having a hard time getting housing, two wars on the global stage. Potential recession, a very cantankerous election coming up in November. So, there's a lot of negative things out there, but there's also a lot of pro-capitalism, pro-American dream things. 48% of all jobs are created by small businesses, not large Fortune 500 companies. You have a lot of Gen Z and Xers and younger people saying, hey, I want to start my own business, and never in the history of the world could you start a business with such small amount of capital. So you have a lot of innovation in America. You have a lot of creativity. You have a lot of passion. And the American dream is more of a mindset, not an actual amount in your bank account.
And what would you say, Mark, especially for those young people that you're mentioning, what is so critical about keeping this idea of the American dream alive? And why is it so significant that so many of them are starting their own businesses?
Yeah. Well, it's exciting, isn't it, right? I mean, to be your own boss and to create new innovative things. And that's why I think Shark Tank's probably so popular today. But look, it's the American dream is based on the basic principles of freedom that make this country great. Freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom to own property, freedom to create your own sense of happiness. And a lot of that comes back to innovation, creativity, and self-expression. What I tell people about the American dream is it's not an amount in your bank account. It's not size of your portfolio. It's not if you retire in Boca, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not if you become massively wealthy. Entrepreneurism and creativity and self-expression, to create a vision, something that's impossible, and then turn it into a reality, an expression of who you are and what's important to you in life. That's the American dream. And you might get massively wealthy from that. You might, just have a happy, wonderful life, creating and expressing what you want to in the world. So it's, I think the American dream gets bashed because a lot of people think it's materialism. And that's what the American dream is about. It's not about materialism. It's about creativity and self-expression.
Love that. And I think that I think you're so right. I think so many people do take this concept of achieving the American dream, and it is very centered around, I'm going to get the highest paying job, or I'm going to get the car, and I'm going to get the house. And I think that probably for a lot of young people who are sort of coming up in this age of inflation, where financially it's very challenging for them, where they may have been sort of lost some belief or lost some idea that this American dream was going to be possible for them. Is that what you feel like has happened?
I definitely feel like it's happened, but I feel like it's also happened at the education level. I don't think we're teaching the values and the principles about the American dream. I became infinitely aware of the American dream from my father. We were born in pretty destitute poverty in Charleston, West Virginia. My grandpa stayed there for the rest of his life. My dad, from the time he was 10 years old, shined shoes, sold newspapers, sold clovering salve to the miners coming out of the coal mines. And he always believed that there was a way to get out. My grandfather, on the other hand, believed that money was evil. He believed that only evil people get money. He believed that you had to work for the man. And he believed that he was entitled to things. And he basically lived his whole life as a victim. So when I was 10, my dad gave me a copy of Think and Grow Rich. And he said, read this, and then we'll talk. And I asked him, I said, Dad, how did you get out of the hollers? And he said, well, I asked a good question. I said, it sounded like something Yoda would say. I'm like, what are you talking about? You asked a good question. He said, well, think of this. If I asked myself, why was I doomed to live in the hills of West Virginia and die there in poverty? My life would have come out one way. Instead, I ask a different question. How can I get out of the hills of West Virginia, create value for myself and others, and create service and become an entrepreneur? So that led my life in a completely different direction. So the mindset of and this is what we teach our kids in school today: victimhood, entitlement, that you could get something for nothing. And even if you give people something for nothing, it doesn't create happiness. It doesn't create fulfillment. It doesn't create sense of achievement. It doesn't create prosperity, because in the soul, you're dead. Only hard work and inspiration and dedication can create that freedom, that fulfillment, and that love that's part of the American dream. And so the American dream, the idea of hard work, serving others. My dad always told me, you're not entitled to anything in life. You have to earn it. And if you want to have wealth and prosperity, figure out what you want in wealth and then create that much value for other people. And that's the only thing you're entitled to, is working hard. And that's a completely different mindset than many people have today.
I think it's easy to forget the exponential shape of success and what hard work produces. And so, I mean, how much do you feel that social media plays an impact on the expectation, especially of the younger generation, on what the American dream should produce and when?
Well, Chris, that's a great question. One I haven't thought about, but I always have an opinion. So I think it makes it look way easier than it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think these ads on, Instagram and Facebook and probably TikTok, I mean, it makes you look like, you're going to drive a Ferrari and you're going to have a multi-million-dollar house in LA and you're going to, have your own private airplane, and all you got to do is just hit click, watch my video for 5 minutes. And creating money is creating wealth for other people and serving the needs of other people. I always tell people, if you want to create the American dream, for yourself, create the American dream for other people. And so an entrepreneur and a person interested in the American dream constantly has to be imagining and putting themselves in the other person's shoes. And it's hard work. You're going to have mistakes. You're going to have competition, massive competition. If anything's easy, the market's going to attack it. So I think social media, for the most part, it gives a little bit of hope and inspiration, but it's often false hope and inspiration.
So true. Mark, I'd love for you to talk about, you've got 8 kids, so you got a big family, and so you're living this right now. And I know they range in ages. I was telling Chris before, I already connected with you because I also come from a big family. I don't have 8 kids. I come from 8 kids. I have 1 kid, 1.5, one on the way. And I tell people often, like, nowadays, I feel like having a lot of kids is the real flex, because it's so expensive, right? And I think what's also the real flex is someone like you who's out there not only raising a family, but also living these principles. And I'd love to hear how you're instilling this in your kids and how you're teaching them about this, other than obviously living it. I think that's the greatest way to teach them, which is to be their physical example of it. But also, what are you teaching them so that they're going to grow up and have these money principles with them and these success principles with them?
Yeah, I'm my wife and I, when we got married, we both had 3 children each, and we made an agreement: no kids and no dogs.
Yeah.
No dog. And so we have 2 kids and 3 dogs. So
I was going to say, how'd that work out for you, Mark?
Yeah, it's working out great, actually. So, but they're little. We have them ranging all the way from 30 all the way down to 9. We have 11 and 9. Gage and Liam still living at home. It keeps you young for sure. But I always talk to them about developing the screen of the American dream. Because what I've discovered in looking at both investing and living an extraordinary life And living an extraordinary life is not about money. I try to tell them, look, guys, it's not about money. And it's hard to tell that to kids that have a little bit of money. Money cannot make you happy. And I discovered this because I had have a lot of clients in my personal practice. They had millions and millions and millions, and they were miserable. They were always wondering when the market's going to crash, and are they going to run out of money, and what's going to happen with the government, and what's going to happen with taxes. So they just live in total fear and anxiety. And then I had clients with a lot less money, but somehow were living a world of freedom, fulfillment, and love. And it also was counterintuitive that for some of them, the more money they had, the more miserable they were. You think about Elvis or Marilyn Monroe or Howard Hughes, these people that had massive amounts of money and fame, but were actually very miserable. So money or fame and power doesn't make you happy. What makes you happy, I tell them, is to have a purpose that's greater than money. And if you have a purpose that's greater than money, then you actually don't need money. I tell them, I said, look, if I lost everything tomorrow, I would, if I had to, I'd go to work, I'd go knock on some business's door and say, I'll work for free because I'll prove my worth. Give me a job. I don't care if it's sweeping the floor or, or picking up trash or whatever it is. And then I'll prove my worth and I'll get trained and I'll grow. And entrepreneurs are always looking for people like that to take on leadership positions. But a lot of people today, when they want to start at the top, they don't want to start at the bottom. So I tell my kids, number one, nobody owes you anything. My dad would tell me a story. He would say, there's a king, and the king sent 50 of his wisest men out to get all the wisdom in the world. They came back with 100 books. And he said, too much, go back out. They came back 10 years later, they had 4 books. He said, too much. They came back 3 years later, they had 1 sentence. There ain't no free lunch. And there's no free lunch in this world. And no one owes you anything, and you have to work hard, and you have to inspire, and you have to create value for other people. And you have to not take yourself too seriously. You have to have thick skin and not be easily offended or easily hurt. Especially in today's world, you talked about social media. There's going to be haters, and there's going to be people who attack you, and on many different levels. And you have to be thick-skinned enough to avoid all that.
You said that the word happiness. I'd like to dig in there a little bit because the question is like how important is it to broadly define what happiness means? And I think you started to do that. But then equally, or maybe even more important, how is it impactful to define what happiness means for you to be able to live a fulfilled life?
Yeah. Well, happiness is an interesting thing. Studies show that the more you pursue happiness, the less you have of it.
Yes.
So when I say freedom, I always talk about an extraordinary life having 3 things. Freedom, meaning the ability to express yourself and not feeling constrained, embarrassed, ashamed, potentially shut down by social media. So be able to express yourself. Fulfillment, meaning to have a career or an avocation that fills you with a sense of accomplishment, a sense of making the world a better place, a sense of being of service to other people, and then love. A lot of business people don't talk about love, but I do. And love means an affection and a closeness for other people, a connection through communication with other people. And so when I talk about happiness, I talk about pursuing those things. And if I pursue that, and I coach people in our training programs of how to create a purpose in life, a meaning in life, where they can pursue that, and that happiness will be a natural outflow from helping other people and being of service to other people. I got a great opportunity to interview Arnold Schwarzenegger, who also endorsed the book, and he has a book called Being of Service. And he talked about, in his life, coming to America from Austria, born in Austria, built in America, big believer of the American dream, that you be a service to other people and the money will come and the appreciation will come and the love will come and the happiness will be a natural result. But if you pursue happiness, it's really, it's like a ghost. It tends to be very hard to capture if you just go for it.
Yeah. And there's like a connotation with like, I guess acceptance or relaxation is not the word I'm looking for, but almost like you're sitting back versus pursuing the difficult things, which will produce that experience in the end.
the more that we can focus on other people, the better that becomes, and the more we can ask the right questions and not be a victim of life.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 32 years old, I was diagnosed with osteonecrosis, which means bone death, in both of my hips, and it was very painful, and I couldn't really walk. And what was going through my mind was, why me? Why me? Why me? And I hate victimhood and entitlement, but I was being a victim. And I went into a doctor's office and I saw 10 children who were hooked up to chemotherapy. They're all under 10. And I'm thinking, you're whining, you're crying, you're feeling sorry for yourself. What makes you think you get to live a life without pain, without suffering, without challenge? It's time to man up and deal with this. And at 32, I had both of my hips replaced. Instead of saying, why me, I started saying, why not me? I'm not special. I don't get to live a pain-free life. Let's fix this thing and go on living. But I think a lot of people say, why me? And why can't I get it done? And why are taxes so high? And why is it so hard to do this and that? And it's a very victim, the American dream, individuality, hard work, and serving others versus entitled and self-pity. And those two things, I know it's not popular to talk bad about entitlement, but
you're safe
those
here,
things
Mark.
will destroy people. Entitlement and victimhood. I was right as I was writing the book. I don't like to think of myself as entitled, but I had someone ask me, Josh, my vice president, said, do you think that there's always that you're always being a victim when you complain? And I said, yeah, I think every time that you complain, and everybody complains, right? Yeah, every time I complain, I'm a victim. But even worse, I'm also entitled. I'm entitled to the thing I'm complaining about. I don't like to pay taxes. Okay, well, then it means I believe I shouldn't have to pay taxes. So that it's easy to get hooked up into that victimhood and that entitlement, no matter how much money you have or how much prosperity you have. That takes away from your happiness, complaining and victimhood.
I think this is, especially as we're on the subject of like specifically how this shows up for young people, I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges that a lot of young people have, is that I think victimhood is easy when you're surrounded by other people who are exhibiting that same behavior, right? So it's also, you can easily slip into that when you're surrounded by a bunch of complainers or people who don't like the way that it is. And I love what you said about this idea that you're not exempt. And I think this is something that's really challenging for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. You're not exempt from the hard things. There was never a promise made to you that you could achieve the American dream and it would be easy. The only promise that was made to you, and however you define that, I imagine, is that you could achieve it. And it's entirely up to you to decide whether or not you choose to take that opportunity or not, right?
Absolutely. When I would go visit my relatives in West Virginia, my grandfather worked at Union Carbide, a chemical company, and they offered him opportunities for raises and to go into middle management. He was very smart and really, really intelligent, but he viewed that if he left the front line where he breathed in chemicals that actually killed him in the end, if he went into that next level and even could have been an executive, he viewed that as being a sellout and that money was evil. And so that mindset kept him and his family in poverty. I mean, it's really chains. And then the other thing I warn people about is money demons. They'll kill an entrepreneur faster than anything. So when I first started my business in 1991, today we have $10.6 billion under management, 35,000 families all over the country, 500 advisors that we work with. But when I started up, I had two money demons. One is I'm not a good manager. And number two, employees will just eat up your time, energy, effort, and money, and you can't trust them, and they'll never work hard. And both of those are just screens of seeing the world. And when I looked at what I was getting out of that, I got to play small. I got to be a victim. I got to blame others. I got to be righteous. But I realized it would stop me from ever growing. So I took on I said, okay, I'm not going to keep that screen in place. I'm getting rid of that. There are great people. Look, there's companies with 20,000 employees, so there have to be good people out there. I got to find them. Number two is I can be a good manager. You just have to have hard conversations, motivate people, and stay on top of the processes. And from there, now we have, near over 65 employees and help thousands of families all over the world. But those two demons, just those two, could have killed my business forever. And those are mindsets that I had, even though I believed in the American dream and hard work. I still deal with demons. And when you get rid of them, new ones kind of pop up, like real demons.
Yeah, you call them like demons, which makes perfect sense. I think I've referred to them as limiting beliefs, but it sounds like we're saying the same thing. How do you? It's so true. Like any goals or any like vision someone has for the future, you can paint a picture of where you want to go, but you're either limited in the scope that you believe is possible, or you're kind of hobbled from the start. How can someone, or how do you recommend somebody bring some awareness to what demons they may have or limiting beliefs so they can break through that?
Look at what you complain about. Oh, taxes are too high. Oh, I can't find the right people. Oh, my customers don't understand. I don't know how to sell. Oh, the turnover's too high. Oh, I can't find a good job, or, oh, it's too expensive to get educated. Whatever you complain about is a demon.
Yeah.
After I got divorced, before I met Melissa, I had a terrible demon, which was women were only going to like me for my money. And so guess what? I kept finding women that only liked me for my money. You create what you complain about. Whatever you complain about, you actually create it and manifest it. And then I said, well, it can't be true. Cannot be true that women are like that. There has to be some kind, loving, gentle, wonderful people, women out there. So I wrote a vision statement of what I wanted. I wanted smart, intelligent, athletic, adventurous, kind, loving, nurturing, all that stuff. And I wrote it like a wanted ad. I didn't put it anywhere. I didn't put it on the internet. I just put it in my, drawer. And then I find Melissa. And she had a money demon, which all guys with money were jerks, except that's not how she said it. She used a different word. Because she had gone on a couple dates with guys that were, kind of jerks, I guess, to the waiters and stuff. And so anyways, money demons, if I had kept that one in place, I would have never found her. I would have never had the family I have today. I'd never have the business I have today. They're really dangerous. So then you can look at it, and this is the power of seeing the demon. Then you can exchange it for a new belief. For most of my life, I lived a life where I didn't believe in God. And then I went through divorce. And then a friend of mine said, "Are you ready to give it up yet?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Trying to do everything on your own." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, then you better hit your knees and pray because you're going to need God." And I was like, done, because I'm messing it up myself bad. So I went from a world of no God to a world with God. And those are two completely different screens. Screens, if you can see the screen, identify it as a screen, as a mindset, as you said, Chris, and then go to battle with it. But you have to kill it. You can't just say, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm kind of limited." That's not enough. You got to attack the demon. You got to kill it. And then you have to have a guardian belief, your new belief that's going to take you to the next level. And then if you really want to be a huge entrepreneur or create a lot of value for people, you have to imagine something that no one's ever imagined ever before on the face of the planet. And that's where people get stuck.
Yeah. There's something you talked about, just kind of changing the story, like recognize that the belief that you have, and then like rewrite that story for yourself. And I think it's important to recognize, maybe giving your feedback on this, like you have to rewrite that story or say it enough until it really becomes like your identity. That's something that it reflects back as who you believe you are.
Yeah, it does. And you might have to do a little bit of fake it till you make it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Or become it.
Because it's still going to come back. I mean, whatever the demon belief is, it's still going to come back. But you can identify it and go, "Oh, that was me being afraid of hiring people and growing and expanding myself. Ah, there it is. I got it. That's okay. We're not doing that today. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to love people. I'm going to hire people. We're going to grow this thing. We're going to save people and create the American dream for them." So you get this, but then you got to take the actions. And if you take enough actions in alignment with your purpose and in alignment with your guardian belief, pretty soon you start knowing yourself to be that person. But it might take a while.
I think what's so important about this too, Mark, is you continuously referring back to how these limiting beliefs changed as you grew. I always say new levels, new devils, right? You're like
Good.
these limiting beliefs could evolve as you grow. And you said it earlier as it pertained to happiness. There's a lot of people who put this big goal up on the wall or up on the screen and say, I'm going to go and get that. And they run as hard as they can and they delay happiness and delay joy and delay everything until they hit that. And then they get there and all they do is just move the finish line, right? You just pick a new goal. So you never actually get to enjoy your life. And I sort of had this aha in my own wealth building journey, that it was ironic that the more my wealth grew and the more I learned about money, the less I ever felt like I had. I don't know if you ever felt like this, but I was like, I'll give a great example. Like my one big goal when I was really young in life was like become a net worth millionaire. And then I became a net worth millionaire and was like, that's not that much money. Like that's really not that much in this world. And so I realized that you have to continuously come back to this. So now you've grown this huge company. I know you have more goals on the horizon and you're doing more things. How do you stay in front of this growth? Like, or how do you address these new devils that might come up?
What I try to focus on is I try to stay away from goals, because once I go out and get a goal, okay, I'm going to grow this much money under management, or I'm going to create this, education center, or I'm going to write a new book. Once I get the goal, hit the goal, then I'm empty again, and I need another goal. So what I focus on is who I'm being, regardless of the goal, and who I'm being is a fulfillment of my purpose in life. So my personal purpose, is to help people find their purpose and create their American dream. The more I focus on that and say, okay, what do I have to do to achieve that? Forget the goals and forget the money, because you're right. No amount of money is going to ever make you happy. Because as soon as you get that amount, you're going to find someone with a bigger boat, a bigger yacht, a bigger podcast, a better selling book. And you look around and go, oh, wow, I need that now. That's just natural human. I call it the vicious cycle of wealth. So the way to get around that is to have a purpose. And if I have a strong purpose, let's say my purpose is love, then I don't need money. And I need enough to live and eat, but I don't need wealth. I could take a card, I could get a crayon, I could make a little picture of, and go to the hospital, hold it to the hand of a friend, tell them how much I love them, and comfort them in a time of need. And that's going to be way more fulfilling than a bigger house. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying wealth is bad. I'm just saying that I just got to keep reminding myself it won't make me happy. Mm-hmm. It never has. I've been very, very miserable rich, and I've been very happy poor. So I know there's no correlation.
If you can live a fulfilled life first, and you can build the wealth that's part of that mission for you, then you can be doubly fit overall, right? It can be an exponent on a fulfilled opportunity, but it's not the only thing.
Yeah, Chris, exactly. There's studies, scientific studies. People say, "Oh, this purpose thing, that's frou-frou." No, it's not. There's science that people have purpose and focus on it live longer. They stay healthier. They have more energy. They have more vitality. They have less dementia, and they end up with more money. So there's always that. But if the more I focus on purpose, the more opportunity I have to create wealth.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I want to see if you have a similar experience in inspiring others with purpose. That I've found a lot of people struggle with this concept out of the gate. And maybe it's not because they don't believe in it, or that it's too woo-woo or foo-foo. Because like if they're seeking this kind of thing, then they're already a little bought in, but both things are true. But where I see them struggle is they can't really nail it down. It's like it's big and it's hard, or it's hard to commit to. And what I like to tell them is it's a journey. Like you chisel this huge rock down to something that takes good structure over time, and it'll get clearer the more you ask the question. But I'm curious how you approach that, and if you see the same thing.
Yeah, that's great. So we actually have it's about an hour exercise in our 2-day workshop called the American Dream Experience. And the book is based off of that 2-day workshop. But it's a whole hour called Discovering Your True Purpose for Money. And it's one of the 7 strategies in the book to create an extraordinary life. And it starts with people understanding that it's not something you're born with. There's no organ, purpose organ. It's not something that's out there in the world that you can find. You just make it up. And you make up 5 or 6 of them, and then you whittle it down to 3, and then you look at the 3 and you say, okay, well, what about this one? And you start living your life and taking actions consistent with that purpose. And you're not stuck with it. If you want to change it later, you can change it. But Chris, you hit on something really, really key, I think, which is people are afraid to create their purpose because they subconsciously know that if they create it, now they're going to have to take action. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. I want to create a loving, caring world. What the heck? Now I got to do something. And I think it's not, and they're afraid of how big it could be. Well, is it love and care for my family? Is it love and care for my community? Is it love and care for my country? Is it love and care for the world? And you can keep it as little or expand it as much as you want, but the larger you expand it, the bigger it gets. See, I think that the American dream and the ideals of the American dream should be a global principle. That the American dream, freedom, fulfillment, love, freedom of capitalism, free markets, those are great concepts for the whole world, not just for America. So part of our mission is to share these concepts globally.
Mark, I think that's such an important point that you just called out, which is that a lot of people get intimidated by how big something could be, or specifically, I think this comes up a lot when we talk about wealth building, right? I'm intimidated because of how much I could make or could create or could do. I've never seen that life before, right? You talked about your grandfather's example. Like, I feel like I'm going to sell out if I go and take this opportunity. And I see it a lot when people are in early stages of entrepreneurship that they go so far into the future that they freak out. They're like, I don't know how to manage a company that manages $8 billion, right? I could never do that. I'm like, well, you don't need to know how to do that yet. You'll learn as you go. So I'd love for you to talk about that, because I think this comes up a lot for people and isn't talked about enough.
Yeah. The once you realize, wait a minute, I get to have a say about my life. I still live in America where I can open up a company. I can create an organization. I can create a charity. You have those freedoms here. You don't have those in a lot of countries. A lot of countries you don't. So I have those freedoms. Now I just got to stop being a victim. And I got to get rid of the demons. I got to create my purpose. And then I got to create a powerful future view. So it was in Cincinnati. It was February. It was 2 degrees below zero. It was 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I got up. I'm like, I'm not doing this another 30 years. I am not living in Cincinnati. I'm not doing this. And so I put together a PowerPoint, went in the next morning to the office. Melissa and I got together. We went into the office and said, in 6 months, our main facility is going to be in Scottsdale. I'm not living like this. And we had about 30 employees at the time. And I said, you guys can come with me, or you can keep, you people that want to stay there, you can stay here, but I'm leaving. I'm out. And all of our training and our development classes are going to be there. And you got to create the vision. And then I wrote there's a great book about Walt Disney and how he created visions and the unimaginable. And I wrote down a very detailed vision of what the new office would be like, and what the experience would be like, and what the training would be like. And you have to have a great imagination. And then you have to take action, massive action. If you're going to create something, and that's, for me, that's the fun of an entrepreneur, creating something that's never been created before on the face of the planet, like the Wright brothers and like Steve Jobs and like Elon Musk. That's where the fun is, like Walt Disney. And so creating a coaching company and creating a 2-day workshop where people come and learn about money and their purpose. Another terrible problem that people have is most people, when they grow up, have a no talk rule about money in their family. And they have a no talk rule about the no talk rule. No one ever said it. We don't talk about money. No, they just never talked about their income. They never talked about how to invest. They never talked about, because for the most part, people are ashamed of money. They're ashamed for what they have, or they're ashamed about what they don't have. And people typically don't freely talk about things. But you can't kill a money demon. You can't prudently invest. You can't create a business with this rope around your neck called "I can't talk about money." So being able to talk about money and being able to create something, a vision that even if it's a wrong vision, but creating a vision that no one's ever created before and getting it down on paper and then being willing to go for it and face criticism. I think that's, I every time I've always visualized something that would seem I was really psyched about, there would always be people who are like, yeah, man, I'm on board. That's great. Let's do it. But then there were some people that are like, you're insane. That's stupid. Don't do that. My dad used to say, oh, and then there's 9 cents in a phone booth. And I don't know if you guys know what a phone booth is, but they used to have them.
We're not that young, Mark, but thank
they
you.
Used to, they used to cost a dime. A lot of people will do 90% of the work, and when they got that little teeny bit left to do, and they stop short right before the miracle happens.
Yep.
And you got to keep pushing until it happens.
Mark, I couldn't let you go without asking you that. I feel obligated to ask you probably like the most often question that you get asked. So I'm going to ask it. For those that are listening are like, this has been amazing, but I want the money master to give me my money advice. I came for the money advice. So if someone's early in their journey or starting out and you were to give them some advice, I know you're managing a huge amount of funds and a lot of very wealthy people, but let's say I'm an entrepreneur here or an executive and I'm running a business and I'm making some money. What do I do with it? Like, how do I pursue this financial American dream? We're talking about all the things that you can create. But if we specifically talk about money and finances, what's your best advice for someone who maybe is early on or really at any stage? You decide.
Yeah, the best advice for somebody early and late is don't gamble and speculate with your money. It's easy to confuse, especially with apps like, DraftKings and, you got your Robinhood app right next to your Robinhood, app, right? And they're both speculating and gambling. And so Bitcoin, terrible. But 80-year-olds make the same mistake. It's not just young people. There's no value there. There's no underlying company. There's no stock. There's no bond behind it. It's basically based off of P.T. Barnum when he said, a sucker's born every minute. It's pure speculation and gambling. Gold, people say, invest in gold, inflation. Gold's terrible. It's only a 5% rate of return with the same volatility as stocks. Stocks have historically averaged 18%, large stocks. Fungibles, digital currency. There's just so much. 34 years ago when I started this company, it was based on academic investing principles, which say that stock picking, market timing, and track record investing are gambling and speculating because markets are extremely efficient and they price things at the best price. Therefore, only random and unknowable information in the future will change prices going forward. So that means most people, even people in their 70s who think they're prudently investing with a broker, are actually gambling with their money and they don't know it. So they have to start studying academic, empirically tested research. That's why we put together the 2-day workshop. It's not easy. I mean, it's like getting a PhD in 2 days. A lot of this research comes from the University of Chicago and Nobel Prize winners that I've worked with. But I guess the number one advice for everybody, young and old, is don't gamble. Don't turn on the TV and watch people tell you they can predict. No one can predict what's going to happen in the future. And if they could, they wouldn't tell you.
You know what's so funny, Mark, is if you've been on like the wealth building journey, if you've read the books, if you've gone to the classes, the people who do this really well always say the same thing. Like the people who do this really, really well and actually have a track record to prove it always say the same thing. I always love the story of Warren Buffett when he got interviewed and said, what would you do with your wife's funds? He said, I would put it in the S&P and tell her not to touch it. And
not bad advice.
And I hear that advice over and over and over again. And why, even though we're hearing from the experts, the best of the best, that these proven tactics are the right way to go, and to not gamble and to not quest for the new shiny object, and yet so many people do. So many people go lose their money in the market. Why do you think that is?
I think it's human nature.
Yeah.
That's
why there's a Vegas.
You want to just cheat the system.
Yeah.
I want to go fast.
And our documents, our company documents, our vision statement, it was revolutionize the investing industry. And I changed that this year after 34 years of trying to do it, because you're not going to. You're not going to change Bank of America. You're not going to take Schwab out. You're not going to take, look, there's too much human nature to speculate and gamble. And there's too many biases, herding bias. Everybody wants to do the same thing at the same time. FOMO, fear of missing out, confirmation bias. People see only what they want to see. There's so many biases. There's over 180 that scientists have found for investors. So you're not going to eliminate that. And financial institutions know that they can profit from it. I call them the Wall Street bullies. And so they know it doesn't work. Fidelity knows it doesn't work. American Funds knows it doesn't work. Vanguard knows it doesn't work. But Fidelity has 1,500 funds telling you that it does work. BlackRock knows it doesn't work. They all know it. It's the worst, dirtiest, nastiest secret in the market. This is a real money management industry. Really is a kind of a nasty industry. And I've spent 34 years trying to get people to stop it. But here's the other thing: is that people look. You got to educate yourself. You got to do some. I know it's tough reading academic stuff, but you got to find at least a coach or somebody that's not going to gamble with your money that can help educate you and keep you disciplined. Because just knowing the rules doesn't mean you're going to follow the rules. And you're probably not going to spend 12 years going to Chicago studying under Professor Fama, Nobel Prize winner, to find it out for yourself. So that's probably not going to happen. But you can find someone who's made their life about it and eliminate it, and that refuses to gamble with your money.
I was going to ask you, like gambling or speculation. There's like a risk spectrum. Obviously, there's gambling and trying to play the market short term, listening to MSNBC and saying whatever and pulling money out, moving around like that. That's ridiculous. You're never going to beat the market that way. But in the inside of the brackets of let's say we're not gambling in the short term, there's obviously there's risk you're willing to take, right? Because one end, I guess you could say, like, total market indexes, play the 40-year game, don't touch it. But then there's maybe a custom blend of certain stocks that you might want to take. Any advice on how to measure your risk? And
you can't. Yeah, there's you can, if you don't want to just stop with the S&P 500. It's not a bad place to start, but you want to be more diversified that, because the S&P 500, if you look from 2000 to 2010, lost 10% for a whole decade. They called it the dead decade. And in 2008 and 2009, you lost 50% of all your money. So whether you're 18 or 80, that's probably not a good deal. So you want to be broadly diversified. You want to have small. You want to have small value. You want to have international. You want to have emerging markets. And to the extent that you can't take a whole equity exposure, a lot of people can't, you're going to want high-quality short-term fixed income, because it reduces the volatility. And then when markets do crash, then you have fixed income to rebalance and then buy it while it's low. But it's one of the hardest things to do in the world. Most people think they can do it on their own. I read a story in research for the book, especially men. We're the worst. I read a story. You know the movies where they have people that they say, oh, the pilots, ate the wrong fish and they can't fly the plane. And then they have someone come up from the, some guy from the back of the plane to fly it, and they've landed after some trouble. I looked up the statistics. No one has ever done that. Not one single time. And pilots will tell you, no one can do that. Nobody. It's impossible. But if you interview men, do you think you could do that? 50% of all men think they can do that. Half. So we have attribution bias. We have success in one area in life, and we think that automatically means we're going to have success in this other area of life. And in investing, you build a global diversified portfolio in all the different asset categories. But in 2008, 2009, when the S&P lost 50%, now you got to force yourself to sell the fixed income, which is up 20%, and buy the thing that's down 50%. And that is just not a natural human instinct. You got instincts, you got emotions, and you got biases all working against you. So as an investor, you have to know the investing science, but even more difficult is you have to know the mental science. Because if you don't know how your own brain works and functions, it will always do the wrong thing. Even if you start off with the right portfolio, you'll blow it up.
It's like my favorite story I've heard in a long time, Mark. I'm going to use that. Thank you for sharing that. We're both laughing because we're all laughing. Anyone who's been in business has had someone like that. Someone who comes in a completely, I always laugh when someone comes into a completely different industry and they built one company really well and they go into something totally different. They're like, I got this. I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe not.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Do you really?
So love your confidence, though. Love the confidence. Mark, we always ask at the end of this podcast, what's the one thing that you would want to leave listeners with? If they could take away one thing from this conversation or from you, what would you want to leave them with?
Yeah, it's going to sound counterintuitive from a guy that manages 10.6 billion, but the answer is that money doesn't make you happy, and purpose does.
Mm.
Create freedom, fulfillment, and love for yourself and for people around you, and you'll have an extraordinary life. Focus on that.
Well, you're a living example of that, Mark. So thank you. Well, yes, you have an incredible company you've built and obviously manage a lot. I feel exactly the mission that you're on and your love for people in this conversation. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Nikki.
We're going to drop the link to the book in the comments, but if people want to connect with you, where's the best way for them to find you?
You can go to Matson Money, or I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. My publisher's Wiley Publishing. So I'm out there. It should be easy to find. And if you get the book and you like it, sign up for the workshop. It's a great 2 days.
Awesome.
Love that. Thanks so much for being here today. See everybody next time.